Welcome to PCMC. I'm Mike Bongiorno. I'm joined today by my good friend, Mr. Mike Fischetti. How are you, sir?
I'm good, but I need to take this time, as my lawyers have advised me, to apologize. I did promise a lot of PS5s and gift cards, and I know many of you showed up, and I didn't have them. I didn't think that was an issue. Yeah, sorry. I had to make that joke.
That's okay. It's okay. There's a lots going on. Lots going on. Twitter's called X now, huh? What the fuck is that? Me
I mean, yeah, I don't know how. Like, listen, I don't really care for Twitter anyway. The whole thing could burn
neither.
down.
It's
It
weird
could
that
burn down tomorrow, and I would be all right with it.
it kind of is. It's just slow motion, kind of burning to the ground. Yeah. So we're talking about something today that's really kind of specific, but as I was preparing for the episode this week, I found that it got me thinking about actually really relevant contemporary things. So what we're here to talk about today is an unreleased documentary called The Sweatbox. And The Sweatbox is a documentary by what's her name? Oh, I haven't. By Trudy Styler and John Paul Davidson, that documents the making of the Disney animated film The Emperor's New Groove, which is from 2000.
Yeah, it ended up coming out in 2000.
And if you don't know anything about that film, it began really as a very different thing and went through many different painful iterations. And it ended up being documented because Trudy Styler is the wife of Sting, and Sting was asked to do the music for the film, similar to, this is at the end of, or the tail end of the Renaissance. So, you had Tim Rice and Elton John doing Lion King, and you had Howard Ashman doing Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid. So it was like, okay, who's out there? Okay, Sting. Let's get Sting to be the guy who did. So as part of him saying, okay, I'll do it, he's like, can my wife document it? And if you look at the film, it was not going to be a movie. I think it was going to be a DVD extra features behind the scenes thing. But I think what happened is this production began to implode. She was there with a camera. Eventually Disney said, no, you cannot release this, but it came out anyway, or it's available out there anyway.
I mean, it's interesting because it's really not. I'll be honest. I feel like it lets them off pretty light. Like it's yeah. I gotta say, like, yeah. It listen. It doesn't look the best,
Right.
but at the same time, this is not. I mean, for years when you heard about the Sweatbox before it was like easily available, you would always hear people murmuring or talk about it, be like, "Oh man, it just destroys them and it exposes them and it shows them." Tearing down this wonderful film and making this piece of crap instead. Like, people made it sound so much worse. And I feel like if you really watch it, it's actually pretty fair to them. And it seems like most people in it are like fairly understanding, or like, taking the criticism or what have you. Like, I don't know. It doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you that it's not as incendiary as you might think it's going to be when you get into it. Like you said, you hear it's this documentary that they don't want you to see. Oh my God. But in fact, all of these people, especially the higher up mucky mucks, are very media trained, and they are narrativizing as it's going on. So a lot of the talking heads are saying this is a normal part of the process, blah, blah, blah. There's only one moment towards the end where somebody goes, this really isn't that normal.
No, it is true. Yeah. Cause it's like, if you've looked into the history of, like, especially like Disney animation, like how they work, like a lot of what you see is fairly accurate, right. And even Pixar as well. If you've looked at if anybody's ever interested, Michael Arndt did for lack of a better word, I'll call it a documentary, but it's more like a writing advice thing about the lessons he learned on Toy Story 3. It's on his YouTube page. It's like an hour and 10 minutes. And he basically just talks to he names everybody who's in the room, and is just like, they sat there and they told me, like, this is terrible or that is terrible. Like, Pixar didn't give him any problem releasing it. In fact, they gave him stuff to add to it. So
Yeah,
it's interesting.
no, I agree with you, and you know, I found myself asking a lot of questions as I watched it. I sort of was asking myself, is this is this typical or is this not? Am I watching a bad process or in fact a very good process? And why then does Disney not want it out? Because like you said, it doesn't. It shows them doing a process. The Emperor's New Groove, I think, is a completely middling movie. It's not really bad. It's not really good. It's okay.
Let's be honest here. I think that's what it is. If the movie was successful, they wouldn't have cared. If the because the movie wasn't a success there, I think people could have read it as, oh, this is why it wasn't good.
I okay, that makes a lot of sense. Also, I think there's a sort of auteurist fandom
Mm.
that probably believes that the original version, Kingdom of the Sun, was probably a masterpiece. And from what I saw, it was not a masterpiece.
Well, actually, I have to say, if there's one thing that I sort of am disappointed about with it as a documentary, or it might not even be the fault of it as a documentary, it just might be not what they were looking to show because that wasn't their point. But like, how do I put this? Um, you never really get a full, clear understanding of what Roger Ailes' version of the story is. Like, what is Kingdom of the Sun?
I
What
think
is the
I have
actual
an idea.
story? Yeah, you get ideas, but you never really
Well,
have a
I
firm.
I went and watched Emperor's New Groove yesterday for the first time in 23 years.
Yeah, wow.
And after watching that, I watched the documentary again, and I think I got the difference. Well, actually, I think there's three films that happened, right?
Mm.
The original version, which was the sort of brainchild of Roger Allers, who had worked on a lot of the Renaissance movies, and he directed The Lion King. And sadly, after this failure, which he walked away from, he the only other Disney film he directed was Open Season, which is another sort of massive fail.
Open Sea? Wait, I don't even think that was a Disney film.
Was it not? Oh, it's an animated film.
It is an animated film.
Was it? I thought it was a Disney film. Open. Let me check the IMDb, folks. Open Season. Oh no, it's I think it might be what do you call it? Where is it? No, Sony. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
was
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
say, I was just looking at it too. I was like, yeah, that was
Yeah.
not a Disney film.
And some other animated feature, and then a bunch of shorts. So from like the director of The Lion King, it's sort of been a bummer for him since. His
So,
yeah,
oh, actually, sorry, not to tangent, but I do think this is really interesting, and it's interesting you say that.
yeah,
So a couple of years ago, I went to a lecture series where they had several people who were part of the Disney Renaissance talking about it and talking
yeah.
about like storytelling and things like that. Don Hahn was one of the speakers, producer of The Lion King, Beauty and the
Uh-huh.
Beast, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And he was asked during the Q&A section, someone brought up, they said, we love, or, I love Waking Sleeping Beauty,
Yeah.
which is a documentary he made. And we can talk about that a little later. But like and the person said, hey, would you ever think about doing like a sequel and showing all the other films that you made, like those other Renaissance films, those other 90s films, because we love them and we want to hear about the making of them. And what I thought was really interesting was Don Hahn was you could tell like he physically changed and he
Mm,
was sort of like, no, because for us, that's when everything got bad.
interesting.
I think it really is that there is a difference between we, the audience, and how we perceive things and how we've grown up with them
Yeah.
versus the artists who felt like Lion King was our peak, was our top of the mountain. It never got better than that. And then everything after that was considered, not as good or a failure or whatever. Like it was just
Or
not considered.
perhaps a harder working condition because you had
Yeah.
more hands that you had more voices at the top
Mm.
straining something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's yeah, yeah. I just know that like you could tell like there was like a chef. And I feel like that's really unfortunate
Yeah.
because a lot of those films are still really good
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and deserving of like praise and consideration and and I would, hope that the artists know, yeah, I know it wasn't it didn't make $375 million like The Lion King, but
Correct.
trust me, that doesn't mean that it wasn't good or impactful or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to say up front that cinema is a very hard, it's a hard stew to make. And
Mm,
and I'm not really an auteurist. I'm a big believer in the collaborative nature of cinema. And I think there's a lot of great films with similar stories to this that turned out to be a success. I mean, like, I know you're not a huge fan of The Wizard of Oz, but The Wizard of Oz had multiple directors, people recast, major injuries, rewrites. Turns out to be The Wizard of Oz. A more contemporary example would be Iron Man. Iron Man
mm,
was a complete shit show. They were rewriting it on the day before the takes, and it ended up being a very good superhero movie. That launched a fucking multimedia empire. So I don't think I would never look at a production and say, well, that's why it's bad, because movies are hard to make, and I mean, look, fucking Charlie Chaplin would sometimes make a movie. He was such a perfectionist. He'd make a movie and then he'd go, you know what? Let's do it again, and then remake the movie again. So I think it's a certain magic that ends up happening anyway. And like when people online go, oh, did you hear there's going to be reshoots on this new film? I'm a little scared. I always think, don't be scared of reshoots.
yeah.
Scared of when they don't do reshoots. Reshoots is a good, normal part of the process. Movies are hard to make.
Yeah, no. I wholeheartedly agree. And in fact, like, here's the thing though. I think that this movie though brings up an interesting dichotomy with that sentiment, because on the one hand, yes, I film is a very, it's a, how do I put this? It's a very stern taskmaster. It is very difficult. It's hard. It is so hard to make a good movie. If you've never made one, you almost, like, I almost have to, like, you don't understand until you've made a film. Like, you almost don't understand just how hard it is to even make like something okay. So
Yeah.
that being said, the thing I feel like though with this movie is it really depends on kind of if you believe that the Roger Allers version of the movie is authentically good.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then it feels like, then you read it as, here comes Pete Schneider and Tom Schulmacher,
Yeah.
who with in just 10 minutes can be like, yeah, no, we didn't like it. We think it's this or that. It doesn't work.
Right.
And that it then feels like, we have all these artists working on it. And it's like, you telling me that like these two adults in the room,
Yeah.
their say is so, like, they know storytelling and like they know things so well that all these other really smart people who are working together can't see, or like can't, like,
Right.
yeah, yes, it's good to have like outside feedback, but there's almost like a certain degree where it's like, really, that this everything's got to land on these two guys.
Right. And
Yeah.
it makes me think also of the sort of wastefulness of Hollywood, because at
Mm,
that point, Harvey Firestein had put in a performance. Owen Wilson, so much was done, and you think at this point these guys come in to like I understand, like, the process. You have to keep as part of the process. You have to keep checking in. You have to keep getting fresh eyes. You have to keep moving things. But it feels like a lot of it was made, and then they came in, and then it became something else twice. Here, all right. Good. I want to go back.
yeah, please
We'll
do.
go off track, but I want to go back to what you were saying about, do you believe, what are your feelings on what you think the original Roger Allers film was? I don't know if it was good or bad, but what I do know, it was attempting something more than Emperor's New Groove. I think that's the problem,
Mm.
because there's really three films. There was Empire of the Sun.
No, it's Kingdom
Sorry,
of the Sun.
Kingdom of the Sun, which was this big epic. It was based slightly on a novel that was kind of like a Prince and the Pauper novel. It had a bunch of different storylines, and then they said, okay, the first big change was, there's too much going on. Let's focus this. Let's remove some of these storylines and just focus on this one part about the prince being turned into, or the emperor being turned into a llama. And that's fine. And that became Kingdom in the Sun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But then, and here's where I think things went down the drain. Then, after working on that, they came in and said, no, we don't like this either. Let's just make it a sitcom. Let's just make it a comedy. Let's take out the music. It's not a musical anymore. Let's take out any any reaching for anything more, forget it. Only comedy. Comedy is the only thing that we think is working, so that's all we're gonna do. And that's where I feel like the failure is. The cutting off the ambition.
Yeah, there is a sense of them. Yeah, and it's, how do I put this? It's not the, I feel like it's not the artist, quote unquote, but it really is. It's coming down from like Pete Schneider and Tom Schulmacher there, who were the heads of this, who were the heads at the time. And I get it, like they're the executives and they have people to answer to and da 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 da. But it was interesting to see that, like, you're right, like it basically comes down to, we're just making a straight comedy with a very simple thing. And also, it's interesting in this documentary, you can tell that like Sting is like kind of not on board with it.
Yeah.
Like,
He's
is
one of the
also,
most interesting parts.
he is, and he's just like, oh, I'm not a quitter though, so I just have to keep going.
Well, at one point he says, hopefully they'll fire me. If I'm lucky, they'll
Yeah.
fire me. He really is unhappy. I mean, he wrote 6 songs that I believe only one is used during the credits.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Because it's not a musical. The final film ends up not being a musical, and he was working on a musical.
Well, it's almost like they took, if you've seen Tarzan, Tarzan is not a musical, but it does have killer songs in it.
Right.
But they even cut down from that, where like, okay, you know, it went from, oh, we're just sort of doing kind of all Broadway style musicals to, here's our movies with really good songs in it, to, we're going to put a song at the beginning and a song at the end and call it a day.
Right. And one of the songs we're going to have Tom Jones sing.
Because that's really going to get the kids in there. The kids love that Tom Jones.
They do. So at one point in the documentary where I felt like, oh, this has become bankrupt is if you don't know anything about Emperor's New Groove, is it takes place during the Incan Empire. And at one point towards the end, when they're going straight for comedy, one of the production people or one of the designers says like, yeah, we're kind of moving, we're still in the Incan Empire, but we're moving in a more playful direction. It's kind of like the Incan Empire, but like Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, okay.
And Sting has that line.
Sting. Yeah. Say it.
Sting basically has this line where he's like, I sort of hate that I'm doing this thing for this company where they're just taking these other people's culture and they're like mashing it up and simplifying it and Americanizing it and like making it like a, you know, like a Happy Meal or whatever, that anybody can eat anywhere. And he's like, but at the same time, I don't, and I thought that was very interesting. It's like, I don't blame the animators, the artists, because they are within the structure of this company. And like, I don't think anybody is doing it to be malicious, but like, this is what's happening. And I think this is also arguably like a difference that you see in the Disney company in years since, especially with something maybe like Moana or with Pixar with Coco, trying to be more authentic in some respects to the culture of origin of the piece.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit. God, there's so many threads we can pull on.
Yeah,
can you explain to people listening what the title means, the Sweatbox?
Oh, so the Sweatbox refers to way back when Disney Animation like first started. They would screen the movies when they would screen like the animation first getting put together. They would screen it in this outdoor like in this shed basically. So it had no air conditioning.
Yeah.
So you would go in there and like you would sweat all day because you're sitting in a hot box basically.
You also had Walt there, and you're there showing him a cartoon and watching Walt watch your work. So that's also making you sweat.
And he's also usually not happy with it. So you know.
Right. So that's why it's called the Sweatbox. It's a very fun name, I think, for what we have here, because there are the sort of documentary is kind of built around these two big moments of Schneider and Schumacher coming in and being like, okay, let's see what you got, and how brutal it is. I mean, after the first one, when they're just talking about how none of it works, well, I don't understand. There's so much going on. What kind of a movie? Where is the movie? You haven't found the movie. There's a shot of Roger Allers, and you can see his soul leaving his body.
Yeah, and like,
go on.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because even Sting, that's the thing. I think Sting's just like, I think it's pretty good. What are you talking about? Did
Right,
we
right.
see the same movie?
Yeah. Here's the thing, like
And I
having
think
thought
that
about, yeah, go on. I'm sorry.
that's just, but anyway, like if anything, that's what makes you as the audience member like really start to question, was this Aller's version actually good?
Well, I guess to get back to the point I was saying before, like, okay, let's say it doesn't work. I
Mhm.
think then you go, okay, this doesn't work, but you're an artist that's done a lot for us. Let's help make it work. But what they did instead was a fire sale. They said this don't work, that don't work. This one little thing, the jokes that work. So fuck everything else. Fuck all the other thoughts you had. Fuck all the other dreams you had for this. We're not going to make those elements work. We're going to cut them out and focus on the one thing we think is working. And that to me is what's bankrupt. Not that we're going to keep working on it,
Yeah.
not that his vision was great. It probably was a muddled mess. But there's a difference between saying let's work on all these things and make it work than saying, you know what, guys, our ambition was too high, or your ambition was too high, and we don't want to try to achieve your ambition. So we're just going to cut and run, basically.
Yeah, and I think here's the thing is because they do show us animated segments, some of the songs, like they show you like how it would have played out in the movie.
Yeah.
And like even from just those little snippets, you're like, there is something good here. To me at
Yes.
least, it felt like there is something. And the fact that you could have, these guys sitting there and being like, oh, nothing works. This is terrible. That's terrible. I'm like, no, you've got some diamonds there. I get that it might not be connecting the way that it should be,
Right.
but to just whole cloth say that the only thing that works is the llama song and the love song, like I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, in the documentary, they show some of Eartha Kitt's songs, and they're great.
Yeah.
And they're not in the final film at all. There was no Eartha Kitt does not sing at all in the final film, and she had some interesting songs in the original version.
And that's also one of the things that I think is interesting is the documentary also shows you, what's his name? Is it Alex? I apologize, I'm blanking on his name. Deja. Hang on, wait. No, I'm going to be embarrassed if I get this wrong.
Sure. Mike is turning to his library of Disney.
I really am.
He's thumbing through.
Andreas Deja, who's a
Yes.
legendary Disney animator. Legendary. The fact that who was doing he was animating Eartha Kitt's character initially, who's what's her name? Because she's in the final version, she's just different.
Yeah. What's
Yzma.
Yzma. Yeah.
So he initially animated Yzma, and you could see how excited he is. And once they basically come back and are like cutting it and stripping it to this more like comedic story, you see the same thing. Like he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna do this because this isn't good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not what I signed up for. I'll go work on something else.
Yeah. Right. And the same thing happens with Allers. It begins with two directors, Roger Allers and Mark Donal. And after the first big shakeup, you see, I was talking about it. He's comparing it to his daughter going to college. He's like, you lose your baby and it's heartbreaking. But he's like, I can't be. And they let him leave because he just was like, I can't, just let me go. Like, I can't work on this version. So then it becomes all Mark Donal. They left. And I don't know. I mean, maybe if he had stayed, he could have fought to make it a little bit more, because he was clearly the captain of the ship. And and Sting was really like on board with his vision. Maybe and I don't fault him for leaving after how brutal that was, especially after, delivering the Lion King. You know what I mean? Like anyway, I think maybe if he had stayed, he could have kept it from going in the direction it went in, which was just like, how do we take what we have and just commodify this right here?
I was gonna say, like, I imagine maybe it could have been something like a Hunchback of Notre Dame or a Pocahontas, where, while imperfect, I would much rather have those movies than The Emperor's New Groove.
Well, in general, as a film lover, I respect and are more interested in sloppy, kind of not totally achieving their goal messes that are ambitious than really sort of cheap, manufactured little trinkets, which is what, like The Emperor's New Groove is fine. And I know people who saw it when they were young love it. So I totally get that.
Yeah.
It's funny and there is good things in it. And John Goodman's good in it. And it's not a bad movie. But it's very assembly line. And I would always prefer a glorious misfire.
It's funny. I feel like it actually has a lot of the problems that I feel like I see in not just animated movies, but like in all movies, in a lot of movies today, which is movies they have really, how do I put this? Like studios think that they've learned the lesson of how to make good movies, or even to some degree of quality, by sticking to structure, by really firmly sticking to, whether it's the Blake Snyder, beat sheet style of storytelling, whether it's just simple 3-act structure, whether it's Chris Vogler's hero's journey, whatever. Like, it seems to me that they are so just satisfied with, or sticking to these like sort of pre-formatted structures of storytelling, that it makes the movies passable.
Yes.
It takes a bad movie and makes it just okay. But that's it's just okay. It's middling. It's
right.
It's quote unquote like almost like inoffensive. It is. So it's like, you can't argue that we made a bad movie. It's like, well, I can't argue you made a really good one either.
Right.
You made a movie.
Right. It's so in some ways it's almost like this documentary is the sort of other bookend to The Waking Sleeping Beauty.
In a way, yeah.
Because that film begins with the troubled production of The Black Cauldron, and how Disney had kind of lost its way. And then these new innovative voices coming in, and that huge run of Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, like that Disney Renaissance. And sort of that's why it's called Waking Sleeping Beauty. It's like Disney, the greatness of Disney sort of wakes back up. This is sort of like, it's almost like in that film, right? They make a machine, and this machine is great. And by the time you get to the Sweatbox, the machine works too well, to the point where you could put parts in it that aren't totally full, and something will come out the other end, but it won't be great.
Well, I think it's also, some of it, let's be honest, some of it becomes ego.
Sure.
Some of it becomes, hey, we made these movies and they were hugely successful, and everybody tells us that we're really good, and yeah, you know what, we are really good, and we are really smart about storytelling, and we are the best. And when you don't necessarily stay humble, I feel like part of that comes to infect things. And I actually don't like the way that the documentary presents the scene, because I don't think it's entirely fair to the artists who are in that scene. So let me be specific. So I want to say it was after that first screening where they ripped the movie apart, Roger Allers sits down with a number of very famous Disney animation directors, as well as like writers and producers, like other people.
Right. They have like a kind of like think tank.
They have a brain trust. They call it the brain trust, which is the same thing Pixar would call it as well. And they have Clements and Muster, and they have Kirk and Gary there, and Don Hahn. Like, they got all these great people, and in this, the way it's presented in the documentary is that they're all sort of like talking over one another and like giving these notes, and it makes all the notes feel unnecessary, confusing,
right? It's
irrelevant.
Edited, right? It's edited like where it's edited like blah 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 blah, all on Roger Allers' face, like he's just getting a bunch of information thrown at him. The editing makes it seem like they're all just going off and blabbing,
Yeah, and that's why I was like, I don't think this is entirely fair, and I think like that is sort of asserting a certain idea in there,
right?
But also, again, because we don't know, that's one of the issues. Like, because we don't know the full story, whether or not we then can judge for ourselves whether or not we think that was a good version of the story. Therefore, like, now we can't tell if this stuff he's getting is helpful or not, because we have no
Right.
we have no means of comparison.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Well,
But anyway,
yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah, no. But I think that just sort of relates to this larger idea of, what, you mentioned. Okay, so Waking Sleeping Beauty is sort of showing us how the machine gets created. For those who were there, they would probably argue that this movie almost shows this is the machine breaking, or this is what happens
Yeah.
after the machine is broken, and it's just and it keeps going. Um, this is like the negative side of it. Um,
Right. I'd like to get your take on two of the big, so to speak, characters in this film.
mhm,
One is Peter Schneider,
mhm,
who was at the time president of Walt Disney Studios,
mhm.
and the other is Thomas Schumacher, who currently is the president of Disney Theatrical Group, but at the time was the president of Walt Disney Feature Animation. And I do want to say, before we get into anything else, in 2018, it was reported in the Wall Street Journal that he was under an internal investigation at Disney for inappropriate behavior and aggressive sexual language. I do not know how he's still with the company, so I don't know how that internal investigation ended. But I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, it's funny you bring that up because I remember hearing about it in 2018, and then I hadn't heard anything since. Like either, like I never heard
Right.
investigation, like just it just sort of was there and then disappeared. So these two guys, so like I have some knowledge of them.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, these are two guys who came from, and they say it in the documentary, they came from theater. They both came from theater, which I think is interesting because the pacing of things is different in theater.
Mm-hmm.
Humor also makes a big difference in theater.
Uh-huh.
Um, like I just saw a play recently called Grey House, which was it's basically a horror play.
Yeah.
It's a horror movie on stage, but it was really funny.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's sort of done because on stage, if you don't have that humor to sort of break things up, or like if you don't have that humor, it makes plays feel really motionless.
Yeah.
And so like it helps with pacing. And so I sort of wonder like if that's coming in effect, like these guys, yes, they learned animation as they came in. But really, who was there when the major films were made? It was Jeffrey Katzenberg,
Yes.
who, love him, hate him, or otherwise, like he has a fairly good sense of movies. I do think one of my key issues with Katzenberg is he relies a little too heavily on modern pop culture references, as you would see when he goes over to DreamWorks.
Yeah.
And especially like if you look at like Shrek and Shark Tale and those
Right.
kinds of movies. But he, to me, like at least read as a guy who better understood movies.
Yeah.
Um,
And he's a big presence in the Waking Sleeping Beauty documentary.
yeah, and I think like that's, and the sad thing is that really, because of the distrust that Eisner had of him, that really soured things, because he could have, if he had stayed at the studio, he may have been a more stabilizing force than we give him credit for. Like, yes, there was definitely internally, I know Roy didn't like him, like Roy had tension with him, and oh, what was his name? Frank Wells was the one who kept the
And he
peace.
passed away. Yeah, and he passed away.
Yes, and so it's really like if Frank Wells lived, who knows how much longer this could have gone.
Right, like you said, he kept the peace. So he was that sort of like Frank Wells, Michael Eisner, and Jeffrey Katzenberg were like, ego, super ego, and id. Like Wells was like the super ego. And so like without that, everything else doesn't work. It falls out of balance.
Yeah, no, it's true, and it's one of those things that I was, sort of wonder about, was like how could the films have been changed in that way. Um, I think I think that both Peter and Thomas, like they do the best that they can, and they are not what do you call it? They're not malicious in their comments. They are trying to like make the best film possible. I just think ultimately, I don't know if it was, sometimes when you're just in it for too long, like
Yeah.
it's hard. You lose that sense of perspective. And also, I don't know if it's even the studio itself, the fact that they kind of just stuck with the same thing
Yeah.
for a while. They didn't make a non-musical till Tarzan, I think.
Yeah. I
And
agree with
yeah.
you.
Oh,
I
go ahead.
agree. Yeah, I agree with you that they're not malicious, but I do think that they are glib, and I
Mm.
think that they're a little careless. But again, like I'm glad you brought up Katzenberg because it's a good comp because you see like in the Waking Sleeping Beauty documentary, like Katzenberg come in and be like, okay, Black Cauldron isn't working, cut out 20 minutes, and everyone's like, oh my god, what are you saying? That's not something you can do in animation. And I don't know if it fixed that movie, but supposedly it made it a little bit better. And then we have this new era. He had like he knew more, like you said, like he had that glibness and that cock of the walk swagger. But Schumacher and Schneider, they come in with the same ego, but I don't think they're as good as Katzenberg. So they come in with the same glib, blah, 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 blah. I mean, at one point, in a very awkward moment, I forget which one, one of the two of them like jokingly tells Sting to shut up.
Yes, that was I think that was Thomas Schumacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
They,
I was shocked by when I heard that. I was like,
yeah.
whoa.
Yeah, and Sting handled it well, but like that was the moment you were talking about before when they were like, "What do you all think?" And Sting goes, "Well, I don't get what you're saying. I actually kind of like the movie." And so he jokingly goes, "Oh, shut up." But you can see Sting doesn't even crack a smile at that moment. Like Sting's like, it's an awkward moment.
Yeah, it's one of those like I know you can joke with people like when you know them and that like I get that, but I do think it definitely reads as it was probably not suitable in that moment, and it came off less as joking and more as demeaning.
Yeah, and you could see Sting and Roger Allers are taking it so seriously, and Schumacher and Schneider are like making Coca-Cola. And I think that's what Sting is reacting to.
Well, so this is also, and so just I just want to mention too, this is an interesting moment in the history of Disney as a company, and probably like their actions also reflect on the trouble that the company was in at the time.
Uh-huh.
So I think they say that they start putting this movie together in it was like 96 maybe
Yeah.
1996. All right, so that is 5 years from the opening of Disneyland Paris, then known as Euro Disneyland, which after its first year, Eisner was already talking about we will close this if it's not successful, and would have been the first Disney park ever to close. You were talking about the loss of Frank Wells. They bring in Mike Ovitz to be chief operating officer, who was the head of he created CAA, the talent agency.
Yeah.
And Eisner brought him in and then gave him virtually no power, cut him off at the knees from the start, caused tension within the company, and he ends up leaving. And so and then they have to do this huge payout to him because he's leaving. So the company's got that. The movies themselves start, Pocahontas isn't the huge hit they expect it to be, nor is Hunchback of Notre Dame. Like both of those are like $100 million movies, which for them at the time they consider more of a disappointment.
Yeah.
So you have this kind of mounting pressure and tension and this desire and this like need to succeed because things are not working in the company. So you kind of I give them some credit, but also like put it in that context. Like I then can see how and why they're suddenly like, oh, okay, we need to make this safe,
Right.
like safe as and I don't think it's the best, and I think it robs the artists of the possibility of getting that Lion King because you never know. You never know what this movie could have been, which is also, I think that's the issue. The core issue here is we're talking about a hypothetical. And so, of course, in the hypothetical, we're going to tend to believe that this movie could have been great, but it also could have been terrible.
Right.
It could have been just as bad as what we got. We don't know.
Yeah. Michael Eisner is not in the film at all.
Yeah, he goes to one screening, but yeah, we never hear from him or see him.
Do you think he had an edict out like the documentarians can't talk to me? It's to me it's weird that he has no presence in it.
I don't necessarily know about that because like even going back to the Waking Sleeping Beauty days, like Eisner was never that much in feature animation. That was in fact that's why he hired Katzenberg, was like this is the feature animation division, and that's your problem now. Like Eisner was never, he was never that big. How do I put this? He understood that it was important and it was part of the company and needed to be there, and they needed to make animated movies, but he was not interested in like inputting them as much as, believe it or not, like the parks. He had a lot more interest in the parks. He really was always interested in Imagineering. He liked to hang out there, and but also subsequently, like as things economically worsened, he would also really clamp down on them and be like, hey, you got to make we're building a second park in Paris, but you have like $500 million. Like you have next to nothing. And I can say, having been there this summer, that Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris is the worst Disney park in the world.
Okay. I have not been there.
I feel like to call it a park isn't even worth it. Like and I hate to say it, because Disneyland Paris is gorgeous and quite nice and is a really good park. It's just that this park, like there's barely a cohesive theming. There's like barely lands. There's sort of like 3 lands. It's really small. And the fact that you can basically not get lost in there and find your way around because it's so small that like you just can't get lost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's just interesting that Eisner, he was always more interested in Imagineering and those kinds of ventures more so than feature animation. He also was interested in live action, and that was because of him coming from Paramount and having that like understanding of live action. He famously, said, because he greenlit Raiders of the Lost Ark, and he said, best script I ever read. So yeah, that's part of why I don't think he was in. I don't think his absence is nearly as looming as one would think.
Okay, all right. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Disney right now.
Yeah.
By the way, did you happen to read that New Yorker article that recently came out? I forget what it was called. It was basically the death of movies. Everything.
The Barbie one?
Was it the Barbie one? It was basically like it was. I didn't disagree with a lot of its points, but I disagreed with its general thesis. It was basically like, everything's IP. It's a lot of things we know. Also, they spend too much. My thing currently, by the way, is they spend too much because they keep wanting to make Endgame again, and like Haunted Mansion, which I liked, is being considered a failure because they spend too much on it.
How much did they spend on it? I actually don't know. I was gonna say, I actually don't know what the budget was on that. Because that looked like it could have been 70 or 80 million. It looked like it could have been relatively a low budget for those but I could be wrong.
I really loved the new Little Mermaid. I think it's the best of the remakes by far, and I honestly don't like many of the remakes. But I liked it. I liked what they did with it. But that's also being considered a disappointment. And Disney we were just talking about how what they did with The Emperor's New Groove was safe, just kind of making it a kind of sitcom. But Disney proper, Disney as a brand, all they're doing now is sort of making live action adaptations of their classic animated films. Now, as a corporation, they've got more going on. They've got, Star Wars and Marvel and the parks and whatever you might think about those things. But Disney, when it comes to Disney movies, they seem to be in a very weird place. And I'm wondering what do you think about their current creative output?
So their creative output's not good right now. And I don't think I'm stepping on any toes saying that. I think that's just the reality that unfortunately, I mean, so this summer I'll be honest, I didn't see Elemental and I didn't see Little Mermaid. I did see Indiana Jones and I did see Haunted Mansion. And Haunted Mansion I wasn't as hot on. I maybe I need to see it a second time. And Indiana Jones I thought was just serviceable. Like it was just kind of.
I was lukewarm on it myself.
Yeah, like if you ask me where do I rank it in terms of Indiana Jones movies, it's probably for me 4 out of 5, like the 4th out of all 5. So it's not that. It didn't do that much for me, but also like it didn't offend me. It just didn't do much for me.
Right. say I feel the same way about Elemental. I saw Elemental, and there were things about it that I liked. And I do think they marketed it wrong. It was an immigrant story, and it should have been marketed as this is an immigrant story, and this is a story about um mixed race couples and what they go through, and that's not at all really in the marketing.
I was gonna say, like, what you're describing to me is not at all what I kind of thought, honestly. It was almost gonna be like, because the way they market it, like, it almost looks like Inside Out, but a little different.
Right. Exactly. That's how they marketed it. So they marketed it wrong. But anyway, even though there were things I like about it, I didn't love it. The last Disney film that I loved Encanto. I loved Encanto. You know, the new Mary Poppins kind of left me cold.
Yeah.
I like Cruella.
Yeah, that was all right. That was
You know, but it's just I don't know. I don't know. I I
I
have
think,
yeah.
listen, here's the thing with Disney was they definitely bet too heavily on IP. On the IP that they have, they bet too heavily on it. They spent too much, just assuming it was going to make a bunch of money. And of course,
Right,
that's what all these companies are doing, though. Like, I just
right.
want to put that in context too. That
Sure, it's not
this is,
just them.
yeah, like, this is sort of a reckoning for the whole studio system of,
Well, they own so much of it now. They've
well,
become such a conglomerate.
but here's the thing. I think now more than ever, my theory personally is that, uh, what they don't want to admit or realize is they try to make themselves conglomerates that they become so big that they're too big to fail.
Right.
The difference is you are not a, I hate to say it, like, you're not a bank.
Yeah.
Media companies are, frankly, kind of expendable in some ways. Like, media companies don't necessarily have to survive. They can be chopped up and sold and, like, go, like, or they can be spun off. Like, it's not the same as a bank. So you actually can't make yourself too big to fail, because in
Mhm.
doing that, Disney's been getting away. And I felt like this too for the last 10 years, 15 years or so. Like, they've been getting away with looking really good on a spreadsheet because one branch of the company will prop everybody else up.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
park,
Yeah.
the parks and ESPN prop up everything else and make the rest of the balance sheet look great.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but, but once both of those start to tip, or one starts, all of a sudden, yeah, you can't. And for me, I really do wish, I don't think they ever will. Although sometimes it sounds like maybe. You hear those rumors and stuff. I just wish that they would sell off a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
Basically, go back to, you're a company that makes movies and you're a company that owns theme parks. Like, that's it. That is your business.
Yeah.
You
I
don't
wish.
need, yeah.
Yeah. I would love for them to sell off the Muppets to some other production company that has a vision of what to do with the Muppets. Unlike what Disney's done with the Muppets, which is every 5, 6 years they have a new plan and it works marginally or it doesn't work, and then they come back again with another new plan. They, I would love for the Muppets to be put in the hands of another company that could really put focus on it and have and I'm not saying a cinematic universe, but I'm saying a plan for the brand.
Well, okay. I mean, listen, I love the Muppets, but even I, like, wonder, like, I don't know what you can do to get a big audience. Like, I think, well, I think this is also the problem with everything now, is almost everything is niche.
Yeah,
Superhero
yeah.
Superheroes are not general. They're becoming niche.
Mm-hmm.
The market is just becoming the people who really care and enjoy that stuff, and that's why, like, these movies are grossing less. It's the diehards will show, but regular moviegoers aren't coming out because they feel like they got the whole story with Endgame, like, up to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh,
Right.
I've completed my journey. I'm good.
That's exactly how I feel about Marvel. Everything past Endgame, and like we did it. We did the whole story. Um,
And you didn't create a new one like that. I gotta say, like, everybody gives Marvel this tremendous amount of credit, like, oh, their storytelling is so brilliant. And I was like, well, to be honest, what would have been brilliant was ending Infinity War with the original Avengers disappearing, and then you have all the other people left behind
huh.
having to become a team, and therefore you have a new, basically, first Avengers movie where everybody's coming together to
All
save
right.
the old Avengers, and then you can have your big rousing finale, and then you actually have a team that people are invested in. Nobody is invested in, or even, I can't even tell you who do I think is going to be in the next Avengers movie as a as team members.
I don't know. And I don't know what they're aiming. I thought for a while their next big thing was like the Kroll the Kroll story, but then they just did that in a little TV series, which most people didn't like. So I don't know what they're building towards now. Honestly, I have no idea.
I don't think that they know. I think that's also part of the problem is they don't really know. They're kind of spinning their wheels. I think they had a lot invested in the Kang dynasty, and now,
Yeah.
let's be honest, that's probably not happening.
Right.
Um, and I just don't know how game they are to pivot. And I don't know if you heard recently, but there's sort of it's not like official, but there's a strong report that Vanessa Kirby is being cast as Sue Storm.
Uh-huh.
Sue Storm is going to be the lead of the next Fantastic Four movie. So it's not going to be like Reed Richards' movie. It's going to be Sue Storm's movie. And her brother, or that Johnny Storm, is going to be played by Jack Quaid. That one's a little less for sure. Reed Richards was offered to Matt Smith, but I think Matt Smith turned it down. So sorry. I just think it's like, I think it's interesting if they're trying to line up the Fantastic Four in as almost this like Hail Mary pass, even though, again, outside of like the hardcore comics community, I don't think the general public cares about the Fantastic Four.
No, no, I agree with you. You know, this is maybe a pivot in our conversation, but after reading that New Yorker piece, and I do apologize for not remembering the name of it or the writer of it, but it was basically and this happens all the time. It was the most current eulogy for cinema. It was, here's everything that's wrong. And I had a thought based on something else that I was reading, because I was reading a book on burnout in millennials. And when it comes to that IP thing and the nostalgia thing, if you look at it from the point of view of just the film industry, the criticism would be that there's no new ideas or that they are just trying to make safe bets. But I started to think, when I was reading this book about burnout, there's probably something more culturally there, because millennials and younger are the first generations of Americans that are less successful than the previous generations. The millennials and Gen Z and younger will maybe never retire, increasingly held down by debt, student loan debt, credit card debt, unable to buy things. And I wonder if that is why we want fucking IP. Like, maybe that's why I want, like a new Ninja Turtles movie or a new Ghostbusters movie, because when I was a kid, it was the last time that I thought there was a future.
Well, okay, actually, it is interesting you bring that up, because I actually, my theory that kind of could run alongside that is that actually the reason we see a lot of IP and the reason we see a lot of repeat stuff, or we're taking older things and bringing them back and rebooting and all that, actually has more to do with none of us want to deal with contemporarily what is going on in our world. We do not want to deal with the present, and we will do anything we can to not. So maybe we'll use a story about the past to like kind of talk about the present, but we're not directly talking about it.
I think that's definitely part of it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's people talk about superhero movies. Blah, 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 blah. All right, forget about the specificities of superhero movies. If you look at it broadly, they're escapist film, and the escapist film is more popular than ever, probably because our current living realities stink. We're living through hard economic times from 2009 to now. Maybe sometimes Wall Street does better, but for the average working middle class person, it's still been a struggle. You have climate change, which is only getting worse. Of course, there was a global pandemic. Politics that have gone completely fucking insane. The rise of fascism again. Maybe I do want to go see the Guardians of the Galaxy, and they can run around and play pop songs, and it makes me not think about that I'm not being paid enough, that I have no money for retirement if I ever get to retire, things like that.
Well, so it's interesting because I'm fairly certain that we're thinking of the same New Yorker article.
Yeah.
And in that article, one of the quotes came from an agent at UTA um, who basically says, um, and this is to me like the more sort of damning, chilling, tough part is he says, we basically live in a time, could we argue that sorry, actually, give me a second because I want to correctly quote this gentleman. I don't want to misquote him.
Yeah, if you could find, I haven't been able to find it. If you could find it, please give us the author of the article as well.
Yeah, so this is the article I was thinking of. It's called After Barbie, Mattel is raiding its entire toy box. The article is written by Alex Barash,
Mhm.
and he has a quote. So the quote here, again, this is from, let's see, although Barber was pleased, sorry, let me skip on down just to get to like the meat of it. Okay, sorry, I'll read the whole thing. So although Barber was pleased with Barbie partnership, he was clear-eyed about its implications. Is it a great thing that our great creative actors and filmmakers live in a world where you can only take giant swings around consumer content and mass-produced products? I don't know, but it is the business. So if that's what people will consume, then let's make it more interesting, more complicated. He wondered aloud whether such directors such as Hal Ashby and Sidney Pollack would be
Yeah.
making movies with Mattel if they were alive today. It's a super interesting question. It's also an argument that we've lost already.
Yes, I think we are absolutely talking about that same article.
Yeah, and it's that quote specifically at the end there that
Yeah.
it's an argument that we've lost already. That to me is shattering and is kind of
Right.
like if you want to know what's wrong with cinema, it's that the people who are most involved in the system ultimately believe that it's futile to try to reject it, even in spite of what I would argue is evidence to the contrary, which is I feel like if you talk to people and ask them like what were some of the best movies that you saw this year that were successful, like a Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse would be one of them.
Hmm.
And even though that is this IP driven thing, I would argue it's unlike any superhero movie
Sure.
that
Yeah.
I've ever seen in that it is truly emotional and deep and heartfelt and has layers and is artistic and is trying to do, and not just trying, it does something momentous that I thought I would never see in a superhero movie. And just to me, it's like The Dark Knight, it gets to move beyond that moniker of being a superhero movie. Like this is something that is
Yeah.
elevated higher.
Yeah. 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 Um, well, this has been a great conversation, and I have one more topic I kind of want to talk about
Yeah.
before we close because I want to get your opinion on it.
Hmm.
Currently we have a writer's strike going on,
Yeah.
and in solidarity, an actor strike, and it's not just in solidarity because there are similar things that are they're both dealing with the idea of digital and how streaming has been raking in money on this model that is not really paying the people who make this stuff in front of and behind the camera the money that they deserve. I think that when this all does shake out, it's going to make a better media landscape because there's going to be less money to waste at the top, just at giant swings, and there'll be more stability, I think, in things. It won't be like, okay, every month there's 5 new Netflix shows, only one you've heard of, and the others you haven't. Like, I think it might actually create a more maybe less stuff, but a more fruitful media culture. What do you think? How do you think that the writer strike and the actor strike is going to affect the industry?
I mean, I just feel like it's so hard to say at this point. Just, I want to believe that, yeah, I agree. Like, I want to believe that it's going to make things better and more equitable. Like, that is the point of the strike. Um, I think if you think about it, how I put this, I think it has the potential, yes, to hopefully help the middle class or the people who are struggling to even be middle class and work in this business.
Mm-hmm.
I think like that's who has the real potential to help. I still have concerns about the fact that you're going to have executives that are still getting paid outrageous amounts, and that you have, frankly, like some actors more so. Like you usually don't see this with the writers, but like like a Tom Cruise making 20 million a picture or whatever.
Right.
I really do wish that the actors on that side of the, of that extreme side also, like, maybe, hey, I hate to say it, but like maybe there should be a cap on how much you can make, just like there should be a cap on how much you get paid as an executive. There should be a cap even as an actor. Like, do you really need $20 million a picture?
Yeah.
What kind of life like
Yeah.
it's the it's the Chinatown argument. For those of you who've ever seen the movie Chinatown, this is in the movie Jack Nicholson asks John Huston at one point. He's just like, "How much better can your food taste?
Yeah.
How much do you need?" And the sad thing is like I know a lot of people also charge that kind of money because it's ego. It's
Yeah.
like I have to be the best, and it's like to me, hey, if you're the best, it's up there on the screen.
Yeah.
And you know it because the work you put in. So that is sort of my concern, that I also worry that some of the people on the lower end are not going to get their deals because some of these people on the higher end are still going to want to make that kind of money, and it's always going to end up hurting the little guy or like the
Yeah.
person who's just trying to, make a day's pay.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Although I don't know if it was the article that we were just talking about or a different article, but I was just reading something that was saying like, where are the new movie stars? Look at our bankable stars; they're all ancient. Look at Harrison Ford's age. Look at
Oh
Tom.
yeah.
Like, can you imagine? Like, look at the new Indiana Jones movie. Can you industry that's supposedly obsessed with youth? Their major bankable stars are octogenarian. It's kind of wild.
Well, it is this weird thing of like the studio system was known for making stars, and then they haven't made any in 25 years.
Yeah.
And what is the fault? Like, who's at fault for that? Like, I can't, like, I don't know. I don't know if that's the internet or this or that, but like, it is weird that you have that issue. It's also weird that like a lot of the stars who like seem to be up and coming also, like, they're not American. Like, it's usually like, it's usually British actors who are wonderful, but it is also the weird, like, why is it that like American actors can't seem to find footholds in these big franchises, or
Yeah. It's interesting.
yeah, or like maybe American actors are like really well, like they do well on television, but they don't do well at the movies. Why? I can't understand. I don't know.
It's interesting. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being here. This is
And just nothing but hot takes, just scorching hot takes.
just the hottest of takes. Thank you so much for being here.
No problem. Love it.
Yeah, we love having you here. I'm sure you'll be here again soon. We end every episode by saying,
Oh,